We are Rav Yochanan, Asher Mitzvah Shakta Shlosh Shmo Ton Asach Shimain Pesalto. So we learned already in Zvachim, the first Mishnah, that just because, except for a few, but most sacrifices, if slaughtered for the wrong intention, so you have not fulfilled your obligation, but the sacrifice still retains its holiness, and you can put it up on the altar. You have to bring another one to fulfill your obligation. So you're a mitzorah. You're somebody, or you know somebody instead of you know someone else who decided to badmouth you, and he got tsaras, and now he's finishing up his cleansing process, and he has to bring an asham. Now, this unique guilt offering comes with libations. What happened? The Kohen had the wrong intention in mind, so it now becomes invalid. So the question is, do you bring it with all of its additional supplements, with libations or not? So Rabbi Yochanan says you have to bring it with the libations. Why? Because if you don't bring it, then what do you want it to be? A regular asham? Well, it can't be a regular asham. If you don't bring it with its libation, so then it's going to be totally invalid. What other offering should it be? It can't be an ola. It can't be a voluntary offering. Like, why are you bringing a guilt offering? It can't just transform into a voluntary offering, because a guilt offering is not a voluntary offering. It can't just become an ola because it's not an ola. So you have to bring it the way you originally were going to bring it, with all of its supplements, and it's viewed as a invalid guilt offering. On that we ask, Masler of Menashe Bargad Elamiato. So what about in our Mishnah? A keves habayim omer, we have a sheep that's brought with the barley offering, and the its flour is twice as much as the other flour. It's 2 1/10 measurements. So let's say this was slaughtered for the wrong reason. Shlo lishmo tehei minchaso kfula. You should also say that it's additional supplement, meaning instead of the 1/10 that every other offering has, you should bring this invalid offering 2 once. You don't say that, then it's going to be totally invalid. It'll be totally invalid to be put up on the altar, because just like the guilt offering is the mitzorah guilt offering is the only one that has libations. So too, this omer offering is the only flour offering that has double the amount of flour. So, if you don't bring double the amount of flour, so then what is this offering going to be? It'll be a sheep offering that has 1 measurement of flour. What is that? What offering is that? So therefore, you have to keep it the way it was originally. Similarly, v'tamid shel shachar, the daily sacrifice, the daily morning sacrifice, sheshachto shloshmo, that was slaughtered for the wrong reason. Yeitaon shnei gzirin. It requires two logs of wood with 1 kohen. So even though it was slaughtered for the wrong intentions, but you still keep its supplements. You don't switch. Furthermore, tamid shel bein arbaim, the daily offering brought in the afternoon towards the evening, that was slaughtered for the wrong reasons. That's going to require the same as it would have required if you slaughtered for the right reasons. Yeton shnei gzirin, 2 logs of wood, b'shnei kohanim, that requires 2 kohanim. If you don't say that, then pasalto, then it's going to be invalid. So basically, Rabbi Yochanan chose an example of a mitzorah, and he told us that this mitzorah's guilt offering has to be brought with its libation, because if not, well, what other offering is it going to be? So therefore, you have to bring it. To which we're asking, I'll bring you another 3-4 examples where you also have to bring it with the same supplements. So why did you specify a mitzorah? It applies by a daily offering, by the omer offering. So the first answer is, Enachanami, you're right. Nothing unique about the mitzorah. If that's true, why did he specify a Metzora? Amar Abaye, Chada Minayu Nakat. He just chose one example. Sometimes someone chooses one thing as an example of many, and sometimes it's unique. So here it's just an example, the Metzora. But you're right; these other offerings also, if you slaughter it slaughter for the wrong reason, it'll need its supplements as well.
If the Kohen messes up, the person who brought forth the offering, they're the ones that.
Remember, we had that question. I remember at some point there was some answer. I remember it was exciting. Yeah, there was Cohen insurance. Right. Yeah, I think he has to pay for it if he messes up. I think so.
No, I think he did. Pay for it. Yeah.
That's what Mr. Rosenberg asked at one point, and a few months later, it seemed to be mentioned somewhere. Next cycle, we'll get it clear. Yeah. Okay. So we'll do 2 that today. We'll start at 5. Okay. Yeah. So Rabbi Abba argues. Rabbi Abba Amar Bishlama Hanach. These other examples you gave, they really could be. If you bring it without its supplements, it could be considered in Ola. It can be considered an Ola if you don't bring its supplements as Ola to the temple. Next page. But this one, Ilo Chazi, 1 second. Bishmahanach Olos Ninhu. So Ilo Chazu La Olos Chova, Karbi La Olos Ndava. These offerings that are considered Ola offerings that are fully consumed on the temple, like the daily offering is fully consumed. So if it's not considered an obligatory Ola offering, you can view it as a voluntary Ola offering. When you see this offering being brought up, you can come to one of 2 conclusions. Either it's a daily Talmud offering, which is an obligatory Ola, you have to bring it. But now it was slaughtered for the wrong intention, so it's invalid. Even if you don't bring its supplements, it could still be, it's in the same category, it's still an Ola, a burnt offering. So you can view it as a Ola Snadava, as a voluntary Ola offering. But Ela Halcha by the Metzora, what are you going to view it as? Why are you bringing a guilt offering out of left field? So if you're a Metzora, I understand. If you're not bringing its libations, which it requires, and you're just bringing a guilt offering, those come for certain averas, for certain sins. So what sin did you do? So Halcha Ilo Mukmas Le B'Milsei, Ashan Adava Mi'ika. There's no such thing as a voluntary guilt offering. That is a contradiction. You can't bring a voluntary sin offering. You can voluntarily sin, right? Yeah, but you can't. What's a voluntary sin offering? Either you did or you didn't. So, okay. Tanya Kivasi Rabbi Yochanan. So a brisa support Asham Mitzvah Shalishmo. O Shalom Dama Midamo Al Gai Behonos. Hare Zu Ola. Interesting. And Asham Mitzvah that was slaughtered. So a offering brought by a Mitzvah that was slaughtered for the wrong intentions, or its blood was never applied to the Mitzvah on the right thumb and the right big toe, and I think the right ear also. Harezu ola legabe mizbeach. It's considered an ola legabe mizbeach v'to nesachim. It needs nesachim, even though it's invalid. You still bring it the way it was going to be brought originally. V'tzarich asham acher lahatiro, and you need another asham to permit the Mitzvah from being permitted in whatever he's forbidden in. Come back to society and other things. Yeah. Okay. So that is that. Kol midos shebamikdash. All the vessels in the temple, hayu nigdashos, were heaped. Now we'll see what this means exactly, because we really had a debate before in our mission, in a different Mishnah. Rav Meir said there was 3 vessels, and Rav Yehuda says there was 2 vessels, and Rav Meir said there was 2 kinds of vessels. One was heaped and one was leveled. So what does this mean? All the vessels were heaped. It's not really true. We'll see. Except for the one of the Kohen Gadol. That one was Chudash Kohen Gadol Shaya Gocha Letocha. It was very big. It was a much bigger vessel. So even when it was, it's a funny way of saying it was heaped on the inside. Basically means it was leveled. It was because it's right, if you have a bigger vessel, so you don't have to heap it up above it. You could just, it can contain the whole thing. So it was more level. The other vessels that were smaller ended up being heaped. That's how you'd fit in there your tenth of flour. Now, midas halach beirutzein kodesh. So the vessels that held liquids like oil and and wine. So here's this word again, beirutzein. I wasn't sure last time exactly the beirutzen. It was last time we had it. It was the froth. But I think it's going to be clear from this Gemara. It's not just the stuff, the froth on top, but it really overflows to the sides. So we had last time a debate, and we said, even if everyone agrees that the beirutzim are holy, what about the miluim? So I was confused by that example. What does it mean? It sounds like it's the same thing, but it sounds like this beirutzim, the froth of the overflow, really goes over onto the sides. So the liquid vessels, the beirutzehen, those things are holy. So you have a vessel now, and you have on the side, like when you overflow the Kiddush cup or whatever, or Avdallah cup. So on the side, the stuff that drips, is that holy too or not? So we're saying it is. Umidas hayavesh. I think we're gonna have three opinions what the difference is. Umidas hayavesh, a vessel containing dry things like flour. That if it overflows, it's considered chol. It's mundane. That's the first opinion. Rabbi Kiva over midas lach kodesh. The midas halach is kodesh, the vessel containing liquids. The overflow is going to be holy. Lefikach beirutzein kodesh. Since the vessel is holy, the overflow will be holy. Midas yavesh chol, lefikach beirutzein chol. Rabbi Kiva says, since the vessel containing dry things is a mundane, its overflow is mundane as well. Okay, we'll see more what that means. And Rabbi Yossi Omer, lo mishum zeh. That's not why. Ela shehalach nekar, the hayavesh eino nekar. So literally means that the liquid gets uprooted and the dry doesn't get uprooted. What I think it means is that when you're pouring into a cup, right? So the liquid, so it starts off inside and then it goes, as you keep pouring more, the stuff that was inside ends up going to the outside. But by something which is dry, so when you're pouring in, let's say, flour into a cup, which part goes on to the outside? The part that never had room in the inside, right? It never made it in. Yeah. So that's what it means. The liquid started in, and you kept pouring more and more. But as you pour, the way the science experiment goes is as you're pouring, the part that ends up on the outside is the part that was inside first. That's how the part that gets up to the outside. So that's why it was holy, and then it overflowed. But by the flour, it never got in. You never get in, so then you can't be holy. That's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Okay. So what does it mean that don't think too hard. I'll make a mess. So what does it mean that all the vessels were heaped? It's not really true. We had Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda had a debate how many vessels there were. I think Rav Meir said 3, and Rabbi Yehuda said 2. And the first opinion, how there was 2. One was a tenth and one was a half of a tenth. And Rav Meir said there was 2 tenths vessels. Why? Because one of them was heaped and one of them was level. So what does it mean all the vessels were heaped? It's not true. So unless it's the third opinion. But money, Rav Meir, if the Mishnah of Meir, only one was heaped. And Irabanan, there was only one dry vessel that held a tenth, and it was machuk, and it was level. So what do you mean all vessels were heaped? Rav says really the Rav Meir, and when it says all the vessels, it doesn't mean all the vessels, it means all the measurements. So that vessel that is heaped, all its measurements in that vessel were heaped as well. Whatever that vessel that was meant to be heaped was, all its measurements were heaped. Yeah, everything in that one vessel ended up being heaped. The second time we saw already these words, kol midos, all the vessels, means all the measurements. So it's interesting. It's not like we're just like switching words. The word midah really means measurement, right? Measure for measure, they say. Hashem judges us, midah kineged midah, measure for measure. So it's interesting that the word that's used for vessels is not kalim. Kalim means a vessel. Here it says kol midos, literally it's like all the measurements in the temple. So loosely translated as all the vessels that you measure things in. But we're saying, no, according to this, it means all the measurements of that vessel that is meant to be heaped. All the things in that vessel, but just the word mida means measurement, it doesn't mean vessel. It's used to mean vessels because you measure things in vessels. But it's interesting why we use that language, not kol hakelim. Usually they say the klei hamikdash, the vessel of the temple. It's interesting. Okay. Midas halach, the vessels containing the liquids, beirutzein kadosh, their overflow is holy. So now, what is this debate in our Mishnah between the first opinion, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yossi? 3 opinions. So let's dive in. Tanakama nimshecha. The Tanakama holds that the vessels that are going to hold the oil and the wine are nimshecha, get anointed, bein mi befnim, bein mi mechutz, whether the inside of the vessel is anointed, it becomes sanctified, and the outside becomes sanctified. Yavesh nimshecha mi befnim, v'lo nimshecha mi bechutz. The dry vessel only gets sanctified on the inside. The outside does not get sanctified. That's the first opinion. Rabbi Akiva Savar, no. Midas lach nimshecha bein befnim, bein mi bechutz. Midas yavesh lo nimshecha kol ikar. The vessel containing the liquids gets sanctified both inside and outside, but the dry vessels don't get sanctified at all. Rabbi Yossi Savar, no. They're both sanctified on the inside, and they're both are mundane on the outside. Well, hold on. If they're both sanctified on the inside, and they're both mundane on the outside, so why would the overflow of a vessel that contains liquids be holy? The outside of the vessel is not holy. The hacha hainu taima delach nakar umigava demonikasi. Where does the liquid come from? From the inside of the vessel. So it came from a sanctified place, even though it's on the outside, it still remains sanctified. The hayavesh eino nakar, but the dry vessel eino nakar. It's not displaced. Thank you. It's not displaced. So, so now we're asking. Hold on. Let's say you never intended that the outside of the vessel, whatever. Let's say you have a vessel containing liquid, but you never intended the overflow to become sanctified. So even though it's from the inside of the vessel, that's never your intent. You want remains to be sanctified. Whatever overflows, you don't want it to be sanctified. Can a vessel sanctify against your will, so to speak? Does it need your intention? Or it's just a reality? When you touch fire, you get burnt. Whether intended to get burnt or not is irrelevant. So how do you view it? V'chinekar ma'yahave. Gavra l'may tzara kamechavin. The guy only intends for what he needs. The overflow he doesn't need. So why is that holy? So 2 opinions. Amr of Dimi bar Shishna of the Rav. So says, you learn from this opinion of Rabbi Yossi, Kli Sharis Mekachin Shlo Midas. The Kli Sharis, the sanctified vessels in the temple, do not need your approval to sanctify things. Once it touches the inside, it's holy. Yeah, King Midas. So Ravina Amar Laolam Eimalach. No, Kli Sharis Ein Mekachin Elamidas. A Kli Sharis is not sanctified Elamidas. It only sanctifies that which you intend for. If that's true, so according to Rabbi Yossi, just because it went inside and now it overflowed on the outside, why is that outside part holy? According to this, it should remain mundane. To that we say, we made a decree. The Gzeira Shema Yomru Motzian Mikli Shares Lechol. There is a decree that if you don't say that the outside part is sanctified, people are going to think that you can go from holy to mundane. You could have something in a holy vessel and it gets removed and it's mundane. And that's not true. Even though this part is outside the vessel and you never intended for it, you're confused with just pouring it into your coffee. So therefore that part's made sanctified. So now on this idea that we make such a decree, we have a question. Most of Reb Zera, as we'll see coming up in 10 days, if we behave, Rabbi Zera says you have to put the bread, the special lechem upon it was every week on the base of Mikdash, it needs to be there for 2 Shabbases. So you're going to arrange it on Shabbos, and you're going to take it off the end of Shabbos. What if you didn't do that? What if you messed up? Sidra Salechem, you organized the bread, you set it up, the Esapazichin and the bowls that contain frankincense, La'achar Shabbos, you did it Motzi Shabbos. And then the Hiktar Esapazichin b'Shabbos, Psula, and you ended up offering the frankincense on Shabbos. So that's invalid because it has to be there for 2 Shabbases. So you started Motzi Shabbos, and then the next Shabbos you offered up the frankincense. That doesn't work because the bread has to go through 2 Shabbases. Yeah, good. Okay, so what should you do now? You want to rectify your mistake. So Ketzad Yasa, Yanichenu l'Shabbos haba. Keep it through the next Shabbos. Sha'afilu hu ala shulchan yamim rabim ein bekach klum. So now this bread, so it started off on the first Shabbos, Motzi Shabbos. That was a mistake. On the second Shabbos, you offered up mistakenly the frankincense, but at least the bread was there for at least that one Shabbos. So what do you do? What do you do now? Keep it there through the following Shabbos. I guess you have to redo the frankincense and then offer it the next Shabbos. So now 1 second. Usually the bread is only lasts for 7 days from one Shabbos to the next. We're now keeping it on for longer. So that's similar to having something mundane that overflows, that really is mundane, but we say it's holy. So we say, 1 second, why do you allow the bread to be on for longer than its prescribed time? V'amai hasanami lema gzeira, make a gzeira. Shema yomru mafkidin b'kli sharis, mafkidin v'kli sharis. Maybe you'll think you can just deposit things for long periods of time on holy vessels. You see bread is here for longer, so maybe you'll think, okay, I can put my bread on there too. I can keep bread on there for longer. It can hold things that are not holy anymore. Even though this bread is a reason why it's there, but it can be easily mistaken as, it can just hold things for longer than prescribed time. So you'll put your bread there, you'll put whatever you want over there, and that's going to be inappropriate. So maybe you'll think that any service vessel, any kli sharis, can hold things past its prescribed time. Just like the table can hold things past its prescribed time, so any vessel could do that. So you can put whatever you want inside. So that we say no. Panim achutz karamis. How can you ask from things on the inside to things on the outside of the temple? Panim, things that happen on the inside, the pnim, the things on the inside, lav kuli al mayadi. Not everyone knows what's happening inside. Only the kohanim are there. However, chutz, things happen on the outside, kuli al mayadi. There, everybody knows what's happening. So by the bread, we're less worried. We're less worried. The bread, only the kohanim are involved. The kohanim know what they're doing. But on the outside, where people are going to see what's happening, it's more likely to make this mistake of thinking that you can pour from a mundane vessel from a holy vessel to your own cup of coffee. That we're more worried about. Even though you make a decree according to that opinion by the service vessel, you're not going to do that. You won't do that by the bread. Okay. Now it says Tanan Hasam. The Mishnah says that in Ksubas, the Mishnah says, or really in Shalom, that what do you do with the extra libations? You have extra libations. What do you do with them? So we say lekeitam is bad. Literally means for the dessert of the temple. That right, the extra olos you have also. That when would you bring them? Extra olos sacrifices when the temple's quiet. So you would bring sacrifices just to honor the temple by showing that it has sacrifices there. So to the libations, you would use it and offer them up when you're offering the dessert onto the temple. Meaning, when nothing's happening, you want it to be a little bit exciting. So you bring up sacrifices and you'd bring up these libations. Says the Gemara, how would you ever get extra libations? What's the case? Every sacrifice requires libations. So why would you mess up, overflow? So my moser nesakim. What's extra nesakim? Oh yeah, the overflow. You have poured in too much wine and it overflowed. Now you can catch into another vessel, and you'll use it for the dessert of the temple, so to speak. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Sari Ka'os Shishaninu. No, in the following case, the treasury, the temple is buying flour in this case, or buying wine. Now, what happens if the market price goes down or goes up? So, Hamekava alav l'sapik slakos me'arba v'amdu b'shalosh. What happens if the seller planned to sell 4 saw of flour for 1 seller? But now what happened was the market value, it really it went down. Really, now you can actually get 3 saw for 1 seller. I mean, the seller is going to win. The seller can now, instead of only getting 1 seller, or he can get 1 seller for 3. So it's in his favor. It's better. Yisapik ma'arba. With the temple, you keep at the price, not at the current market value, because you want the temple to benefit. So the temple should spend less money and get more, as opposed to the seller should sell less and get more. We want the temple to be on top. Next page. What if it's the opposite? Originally, he intended to sell it at 3. So it was 3 saw of flour, and now that cost 1 seller. But now the amdu me arba. But now it went down. You can now buy 4 saw of flour for 1 seller. So here the seller loses out because he's selling more of his product for less money. But who wins? The temple. The temple wins because it's paying and getting more. So mesapik ma'arba. In this case, also you have to go according to the market value when you're selling to the temple. Why? Shiyada kodesh ala elyona. The temple always has the upper hand. So no matter whether the market decreased or increased, however the temple can get more products, more produce for its buck, that's what it gets. So too, if the same thing happened by wine, by wine, if you intend to sell for 3 and it went up to 4, or you intend to sell to 4 and went down to 3, the temple will get the upper hand. And now that extra wine. So if you intended to sell it for, let's say for 3, but now it goes for 4. Let's say 4 bottles of wine for $100, or 4 measurements of wine for $10. So now the temple that got, the market value is only 3 for a seller, the temple got 4. That extra amount is considered extra, and that you'll use as your when the temple's quiet, you'll use it. You'll use it with the other dessert of the altar, with the other olos offerings. So whenever the temple gets more than what really it should be getting, it'll be considered extra. Okay. Now, Tanya Kavasid Rabbi Chia, Bar Yosef, Tanya Kavasid Rabbi Yochanan. A breast supporting each one of these opinions and how you get extra. Tanya Kavasid Rabbi Chia, Bar Yosef, Beirut Tamilos Alaluma, how you osen bahen. What would you do with the overflow of the vessels? Im yesh zevach acher yakrivu imo. If you have another offering to bring it with, you'd bring the overflow with that offering. V'im lanu yifslu belina. But if they remained overnight, then they're going to be invalid. V'im lav mekitzin b'hanis hamizbeach. And if you have no other offering and they didn't become invalid, you would use it as extra for the dessert of the temple. V'keit zeh mahu. How would this dessert offerings look like? Olos habasar l'sham v'oros kohanim. The entire offering would be brought up to the altar, and the skins would be given to the kohanim. That is Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef. Tanya Kavasid Rabbi Yochanan. Hamekabel al v'sapik slatos ba'arba v'amdu mishalosh v'sapik me'arba. If you plan to sell 4 measurements of flour for a seller, and now it went down to 3, give the temple 4, Masapik Me'arba. Mishalosh Amdu Me'arba, if you originally planned to sell for 3 and get more money, but now you're going to lose money, you have to sell 4 measurements for the same seller, give the temple Masapik Me'arba. Why? She had Hektish Al Elyona, because the Hektish always has the upper hand. V'zeh Shaninu. And that's what we taught, that the extra nesachim goes for the dessert of the temple. So each brisa supports these opinions of how you get extra libations. When do you bring the libations? Kol karbanos hatzibur yachal tu'anin nesachim. All communal sacrifices and personal sacrifices require libations, except for every rule has exceptions. Chutzin b'chor, except for the firstborn, ve'hamaiser, or the 10th animal, or the hachatas, or a chatas offering, the ha'asham, or a guilt offering. Now we'll see what makes these unique. Ella shechataso shel mitzora the ashamo tunin nesachim. So a rule, an exception, and another exception. The rule is communal and private sacrifices need libations, except for 4. These all 4 are obligatory. Bechor you got to bring, Meiser you got to bring, Pesach offering you have to bring, and the sin offering you have to bring. Add the obligatory offerings. An asham of a mitzora is also obligatory, but that's special. So his sin offering and his guilt offering of the mitzora, special rule, that requires libations. Okay. Now we're going to have a source for this. So this is just derivations from Sukkot. Tana Rabbanan says the Brisa. It says in Parsha Shlach, it talks about the libations. And it says, I see some Isha Hashem. When it talks about the libation, it says you should make a burnt offering to Hashem. An Ola, a Zevach, a voluntary offering. So now we're going to derive all these different rules from this verse and ask questions on them. So, Sisam Isha Hashem. You should when you make a burnt offering to Hashem, you got to have libations. Yachol Kol Ha'ola Ishim Yehei Tu Nesachim. Maybe every single burnt offering needs libations. Afilu Mincha, even a flour offering. Talmud Lomar Ola. No, it says Ola, and Ola is referring to the animal and not the flour offering. So Shlamim Minayin. How do I know that a peace offering requires libations? Talmud Lomar Zevach. It says Zevach. Zevach is a slaughtered offering. So therefore, that comes to include the Shlamim. Toda Minayin. Talmud Lomar O Zevach. Or that extra word O comes to include a Toda. Okay, so we're including now an Ola, a Shlamim, and a Toda. So Yachol Shani Marba, you would think we're including so many things, include the ones that are excluded. Afa, Bechor, Meiser, Pesach, Chatas, Asham, include these 5 obligatory offerings. No. Talmud Lomar, Lefali Neder, O Benedava. The next part of the verse says, only the offerings brought voluntarily as a neder or an adava. Either it's upon me to bring an animal or this animal I'm going to bring. So only Baba Neder Benedava, Ton Nesachim, She'ena Baba Neder Unedava, Ain Ton Nesachim. Only things that are voluntary require nesachim. Things that are not voluntary don't require nesachim. Mashma lahotias elu. So mashma lahotias elu. Maybe you would once you're excluding these offerings, so exclude other offerings. Otias chovas habaos makmas haregel. Maybe you're going to exclude the obligatory offerings brought on the holidays. So makmas haregel beregel. Exclude the offerings that the holiday requires you bring. And what are those? Mayininhu, olos re'iyah. You have to come to the base of Mikdash with an olos re'iyah. Re'iyah means to see. You have to come and be seen. You can't come empty-handed. You got to be seen with something. So that's the first Mishnah in the Chagiga, who's obligated in this requirement. Vishalme Chagiga, and the other, right? We say Chag. The word Chag we have all over the Siddur on Yom Tov. Chag Pesach Hazeh. So Chag comes from the word Chagiga. Right, so it comes from the word that you bring a korban chagiga, festive offering. So, so maybe you should exclude those. How we can't do that either. Next part of the verse, or the offerings brought because of the holiday also require libations. So far we have voluntary and we have obligatory holiday offerings and special mitzvah exceptions. All those require libations. Mashma lahavi es elu. Once you're bringing these, well, maybe obviously chatas. You should bring also the goats, the sin offering goats. Since they also come because of the holiday, right? Every holiday, right? Yeah, that's the musaf offering. Yeah, so you should bring the chatas offering as well. Every holiday, right? Obviously, that we say no. Talmud Lomar v'chisase ben bakar. Only the ben bakar. Only you don't bring the goat. Only the cattle, not the goat. Ben Bakar Bichlal Haya. So 1 second, but a Ben Bakar, this cattle was already included. What's it referring to? It was already included in terms of when it said about see some Isha. It says anything which gets fully burnt on the altar. That was the beginning of the verse. This cattle that's brought is something which gets fully burnt up on the altar. So why is it specified? Why is it singled out? Velama yatsa lahakishelov, to compare other things to it. Ma ben bakar miyuchad, just like a ben bakar, this cattle, a year old, less than a year old cattle, is unique that it can come as a neder or nedava. It comes as a voluntary offering. Av kol ba beneder ubenedava. So to anything which comes as a neder or a nedava, coming to exclude. 1 second. Right, to exclude a chatas. Yeah, to exclude a chatas, because we never found that a chatas can come as a neder or nedava. It's a sin offering. So by definition, you cannot have a voluntary sin offering. Then the verse says, "Lasos reach nichoach laHashem min habakar or min hatzon." So you're going to bring, you can bring a pleasant fragrance to Hashem min habakar hatzon, from cattle or from the flock. Ma Talmud lomar. What's it coming to teach you? Lefi shenema ola, since it's ola shomani afilu ola sa'of mashma. Ola refers to any burnt offering, even a bird. Talmud lomar min habakar or min hatzon. It says no, only from cattle or from flock. The Rabbi Yoshia coming to exclude the ola sa'of, the bird, the fully offered up, fully consumed bird offering does not require libations. That's Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yonasan Omer Eino Tzarech. I don't need a verse for that. Harihu Omer Zevach. It already says the word Zevach. It says slaughter. It has to be a slaughtered animal. The Of Eino Zevach. And a bird is not slaughtered. It's Malikad. So Im Kain Matam Lor Min Bakar Min Hatzon. So what is this part of the verse teaching you? Only from cattle, only from flock? Because it says Adam Yaakov is the beginning of Vayikra. It's second for Vayikra. Yaakov Mi Korban LaHashem. Mehema, min habakar or min hatzon. That's referring to a voluntary offering. So you would have thought, Yachla Omer Hare Alai Ola, if you say I'm going to bring an Ola, you would think you would have to require to bring both, one cattle, one flock. Yavi Mishnayim, bring from both. Talmud Lomar, our verse, min habakar or min hatzon. Amazing thing. The second verse of tells you, like offer up offering, you have to bring one from each, one cattle, one flock. In Bamidbar, in Parsha Shlach, it has a verse that is not necessary, which comes to teach you about the verse in Vayikra. That really, when you want to do a voluntary Ola offering, you don't have to bring both. You can bring one or the other. It says, Ratza Echad maybe, Ratza Shnai maybe. Either flock or cattle or both, up to you. So, Rabbi Yonasan, so that is that. So now, Rabbi Yonasan Lama Likra. 1 second. According to Rabbi Yonasan, why would you have thought you're going to have to bring both animals? There's usually a rule we have. When the Torah says bring both, yachdav, together, then you would think you bring it together. But if it never told you to bring it together, your status quo is you bring one or the other, not both. So it mentions flock and it mentions cattle, but it never mentions the word yachdav, bring it together. So you have thought that your default is bring it together. It's the opposite. Unless it says to bring it together, the default is you bring it individually. So Rabbi Yonasan, Lama Likra, Amar Achivar Lechakos of Yachtav. Only the rule is in a bird bring one. Status quo. Says Gemara, you're right. That is the status quo, but here it's different. You would have thought, mistakenly concluded. Next page. It says so extra word. The extra word from above. Do together. It connects. I mean, in the word have to bring according to your Yosha, don't okay, sorry, Zoom ended unexpectedly. Let's just finish the sentence. So according to Rabbi Yoshia, it doesn't say it's as if it says Yachtov. So Libayikra, don't you also need this verse? Libayikra. So he says Haksiv im ola korbano min habakar the im minatzon korbano. He says no. It says in the next part of Vayikra, it says already that another verse separates the two. Im ola korbano min habakar the im minatzon. It says either from cattle or from flock. So the next verse he feels already separates it. I ve'idach, and the other opinion who does not use that verse needs our verse to teach you this. It's strict. That hani mili b'mefarish aval b'stama laisi mitravayu. You would have thought that that's only when you explicitly stated that you're going to bring an ola either from that or from this, that you have to bring one. But if you didn't state that I'm going to bring an ola, then you would still need to bring from both. Kamash Malan. To that, he needs the other verse to teach you that you never have to bring both. Even when you didn't specify, you can always bring one or the other. Charles, good.